Thanks so much, and I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour with all of you talking about really one of my favorite things to talk about, which is um, agriculture, the breadth of what it is, and really helping to folks to understand all the opportunities that there are in this space. And especially for those of you that maybe are coming from different backgrounds or are just looking to understand more because you've maybe heard that agriculture is a cool thing. This is you're in the right place. So we're going to talk today about a few things. So just a quick outline so you know where we're headed. I'll do my own land acknowledgement. I think that's an important piece of what we'll do here today. We'll spend a little bit of time on introductions. I'll tell you more about myself, and then I'll try and ask a few questions just so I have a better sense of the audience. I understand there's quite a few of you out there joining us today. Brief overview of the sector, some kind of key statistics from StatsCan. Talk a little bit about what people think about when they think about agriculture, what I think about when I think about agriculture. And then we'll go through and we'll talk about some of those different areas where agriculture has an impact. And so whether we're talking about global challenges or whether we're talking about areas of interest for people. Because sometimes people are like, oh, well, I'm really interested in the environment, so I can't possibly be interested in agriculture. Well, that's not real. People will say, I'm really interested in communications. What role is there for me in agriculture? Turns out lots of opportunity there. And we'll also talk about how agriculture, agri-food is working closely with First Nations communities on aspects of reconciliation, and explore a little bit how we get, if at the end of all of this you're that much more ag curious, then how do you make the transition into careers in agriculture, or maybe move from where you are if you're already in the ag sector into a different area. And so I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm here today on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. But I want to acknowledge for all of us that as we gather here today, wherever you are joining us from, we should acknowledge that the land and water and living things that are so central to our lives and livelihoods have long been and continue to be central to the lives and livelihoods of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who are here before us. We recognize their traditional connection to this place, and together we commit to reconciliation for a stronger relationship with one another and with the land that we all call home. So let's move into some introductions. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll go into, I've got a few questions that give you an opportunity to get engaged with. So I am Angela Bedard-Hahn. I was born and raised on Treaty 6 territory here in Saskatchewan, about an hour and a half northeast of Saskatoon, on a mixed farm. And I grew up on that farm in the 80s. For those of you that are of a certain demographic, you might know or you might have heard that the 80s was a difficult time for agriculture, and not a lot of people were necessarily encouraged to go into it. I didn't start off in agriculture when I first came to university, but I always loved thinking about landscapes and how they formed, how they developed. Why do the fields look the way they do? And so I started off in physical geography, and it was in my fourth year of my geography degree actually that I took a soil science class as a restricted elective, and I went, oh, this is where I was supposed to be all this time. And the rest is history. Basically, I went on to do my graduate studies in soil science, both here at the University of Saskatchewan and at the University of California in Davis. And I felt very fortunate to be able to come back to Canada, to come back to Saskatchewan and build my career here in the College of Agriculture and Bioresources as a soil scientist, and later on now, most recently as dean as well. But I do maintain an active involvement in both teaching and research in soil science. And so I'd like to maybe get Haley to help me out a little bit and just help me learn a little bit more about all of you. And so, where are you from? First of all, just trying to understand the demographics of the group that we've got here with us today. So when I'm thinking about my examples, I can make sure I'm drawing on a range that represents who's here. And so it looks like we have quite a few folks that are coming from different backgrounds, which is fantastic. And so what's interesting is that for a long time, agriculture, when in this college, a lot of our students were traditionally from agricultural backgrounds. They were born and raised in agricultural backgrounds, and the natural progression was for them to study agriculture. But we are seeing more and more students coming from a range of backgrounds. So like we're seeing here in the polls, quite a few people coming through from different from urban backgrounds, as well as relative newcomers to Canada. So that's really exciting to see that range. And so I'm looking forward to hopefully helping folks understand more of what we've got going on. So the next one here is just, why are you here today? What made you decide to sign up for this seminar and move into this space? So yeah, what, did you come here because you were already in ag and you just wanted to learn more, or you're always looking for more ag seminars, or maybe, all you'd ever thought about, and because a lot of people, all they've ever thought about as careers in agriculture is farming, and the idea that there are other careers was like, oh, I don't know anything about that. And others are somewhere in the middle, right? And so that looks like we've got that kind of spread here. So, a lot of folks know a little about ag careers, but are looking to learn more. But we do have a handful of folks that have never really thought about it beyond what we've got happening in primary production. And then we had, I think, did we have one more question, Haley? Yeah. So this is just for me to understand where folks are at in their career journeys. So do I have mostly, folks that are still trying to decide what they want to do, or folks that are early career, maybe just getting started, or mid-career, maybe looking for a shift? And yeah, it looks like I've got a good spread here. So a lot of folks that maybe have already completed their studies and are looking to build out their career and are saying, okay, is there something, what do I want to do next? What's the next career for me? So that's exciting. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to give me that context, and it's helpful for me just to know as we get further into the conversation. All right, so now you know a little bit more about me. I know a little bit more about you as a collective, but I know that there's lots of different aspects for each of us as an individual, and that's one of the amazing parts about agriculture, is that there really is kind of something for everything, something for everyone. So just a few numbers that folks maybe aren't familiar with, and so I just pulled these from Stats Canada summaries, and so the first number that I've got here is 2.3 million. That's the number of people that are employed within the agriculture and agri-food system. And so this includes everything from primary producers, so the traditional farming, the dairy producers, crop producers, and so on, the processors, the folks that are working for the processing plants that are basically turning the wheat into flour, or turning the canola into canola oil, processing dairy into cheese and yogurt, and so on, the retailers and wholesalers that are distributing that, the input and service providers, the folks that are servicing those various, the production and processing industries, and food service providers. And so certainly in terms of numbers, the food service providers is the biggest set of numbers. All of us interact with food service providers on the daily because we all need to eat. So that's your groceries and so on. But over 500,000 jobs, about 540,000 jobs out of this total are in that primary production and food and beverage processing alone. And that's some of the space, the diversity of what's associated with that, as well as the thousands of jobs associated with input and service providers that are often surprising for folks. All the things that support the production and processing side of agriculture. The next number I have there is 149 billion, and that's the gross domestic product of Canada's agri-food system as a whole. And so that's about 7% of Canada's total GDP. For comparison, the oil and gas sector accounts for about 3.2%. If we just look at, again, at primary production, primary agriculture and the food and beverage processing sectors, that's about 3%, so on par with oil and gas. And so we often think in terms of, what do we see as the big economic drivers in Canada? And when we think about that, service provision overall is the number one, but we should be thinking about agriculture as a really key part of our national economy. And the last number I have here is 62.2 million, and that's the number of hectares of farmland in Canada. So Canada is a big country, so it's a big geographic landmass, and farming accounts for about 6.2% of our land area. About 82% of all of this farmland is in the Canadian prairies, and about 40% of Canada's farmland is actually right here in Saskatchewan. So I'm surrounded by a lot of that land myself. So I'm going to ask Haley to take a look at the chat because I want you guys to tell me, what do you picture when you think about agriculture? What comes to mind? Are you picturing tractors, cows? Are you picturing drones, milk, eggs? What comes to mind when you think about agriculture? Do you think about big business, small business? What are the things that pop into your mind? Haley, what are you seeing popping up in the chat there?
We have a couple answers. Wheat, fields of crops, food security for everybody. Yep, more of the same crops, food, farms, big fields. Yeah, those tractors and irrigation, those seem to be the big themes here.
Yeah, and so a lot of people, that would be what they would think of. And, I often joke that one of the worst things for agriculture is that often when people think about agriculture, what they picture is this, right? It's a cool painting, American Gothic from 1930. Nobody has ever said, what was a great era for agriculture? The 1930s, right? So, but people often think about this. This is one of the images that comes to mind, in addition to all the things that you talked about. So classic painting, American Gothic, like Grant Wood, people looking hard done by and, with their pitchfork and kind of living a hard life of manual labor. And that may have been the reality at one point in the history of agriculture, but I can tell you right now, what do I picture when I think agriculture? I originally started off when I was putting this presentation together, and I was thinking, what all could I put on this slide? And there wasn't enough room on a slide to actually put everything together. So when I think about agriculture, I think about this. I literally think about the whole world, because to me, agriculture is one of the unifying things. We all need to eat. Every human being needs to eat on this planet, as do all of the other living creatures. So whether we're talking about plants that need to photosynthesize, that are removing carbon dioxide and capturing that energy from the sun into their biomass and how that fuels the whole ecosystem. To me, agriculture is part of our global ecosystem. Fundamentally, it's part of the planet, and that's how we can manage to have as many billions of people as we do on the planet. I also think at this, when I think about the world, but I'm thinking about multiple scales, everything from the genome to global atmospheric circulation systems, how that affects the weather, greenhouse gas emissions and their relationship with agriculture, both as we hear about agriculture as a source of greenhouse gas emissions, but I think a lot about what a significant sink it is and its role as actually part of the solution for climate change. I think about everything from experiments in the laboratory to global supply chains. That's all part of agriculture, and everything from the low tech to the high tech. And so with that kind of perspective, like I say, I had this whole swirling mass, one of those screens where all the little pictures were popping up, and I thought, I'll just put a picture of the world in there because that's what I think about when I think about agriculture. And really part of what agriculture as a sector does is tackles global challenges. And so as I shift into talking more about surprising career opportunities in agriculture, I do want to start by giving some examples of people that are having a big impact through their careers in the agriculture sector. Agriculture and agri-food are, and one of you at least noted that in the chat, they are essential to global food security, but they also play a critical role in many of the biggest challenges facing the world today. So they are actually, agriculture as a system is part of the climate change solution, actually. It is part of solving world hunger. Responsible agriculture, sustainable agriculture is essential for ensuring long-term water security for our planet. All these things are closely intertwined. Energy security as well, as we think about alternative energy sources and their relationship to biomass. All of those big global challenges, the biggies, food security, water security, energy security, sustainability, all of those are intimately linked with agriculture. And so the ways that agriculture interfaces with these are maybe some of those first few surprises. And so I'm going to go through first, I'm just going to give you a handful of examples of folks. They all happen to be from Saskatchewan, but their careers are touching folks on both a national and an international level. So bear with me, they just happen to be folks that I know relatively well, and I could provide great examples from right across this country or indeed around the world that would be quite similar. So the first example I'm providing here is Rick Block. Now I've known Rick for a lot of years. We were actually in school around the same time where he studied soil science, but while he was, what he was really into was agroecology. And important to him was how stewardship benefits families and communities. So he really spends a lot of time thinking about basically how taking care of the land and sustainable agriculture production systems are of an essential benefit both for food security but also for social security. And so currently Rick works with the Canadian Food Grains Bank, which is a church-based organization that works with local organizations in developing countries to really tackle those food needs. And so helping to achieve long-term solutions to hunger and to help foster informed action. And so every time I talk to Rick, he's working on projects that are aimed at helping developing countries adopt some of the sustainable agriculture practices that we've developed in places like the Canadian prairies that can help them reduce their risk of soil erosion, soil loss, build up their soil health for more sustainable cropping systems, help them better understand some of the benefits associated with different cropping rotations that maybe they've lost. They may have known to do those, but have been pressured to go to more of a monoculture. And so Rick is working using his knowledge of agriculture, working with countries around the world, with communities around the world, to help address some of, to help build their understanding and share some of this knowledge and experience. Really hands-on global development work rooted in agriculture. And he previously spent several years working as part of Heifer International, which is another organization that's focused on food security. So, yes, he's still working related to primary agriculture, but in a way that's touching families around the world. Sustainability. So folks, we talk about sustainability in agriculture all the time, but if you're not in the agriculture sector, you might not realize just how foundational it is to everything that we do. And so this is Jenna Sarich. She's a relatively new animal science grad from the University of Saskatchewan. She's did both her bachelor's and her master's here. She works for the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef and the Canadian Cattle Association, and she's really looking at sustainability with respect to beef production. And so you've probably heard, oh, beef is terrible for the planet, and it's not actually. So there's all kinds of things related to cattle production so that are important for sustainability. So and highlighted a few of those here. So in Jenna's work, she's looking at how beef production is important for the circular economy. Cows can eat grass, we can't eat grass, and so if we've got systems where we're only able to produce, whether it's where we're only able to produce forage that can't be consumed by humans, cattle are one of the best ways to convert that into a protein source, a nutritious protein source that can sustain us. So contribution to the circular economy, preserving grazing lands, acknowledging that some of the grazing lands are essential for preserving grassland ecosystems that would otherwise, be vulnerable for loss. So she's doing a lot of really important work in terms of raising awareness around this. And actually this year she's been serving as a Nuffield Canada Scholar. So I won't talk a whole lot about the Nuffield Scholarship Program, but it's a cool opportunity for folks in agriculture to see more of the world and learn from practices elsewhere, build up their global network. And so she has been traveling around the world, learning more about different technology and management practices that could be applied on farm and in Canada to advance sustainability and production here. And so really exciting to see how Jenna's work is going to unfold over the next little while. The next one I want to highlight is Murad Al-Khatib. And so Murad did not do his degree in agriculture, but he has had a huge impact on the ag sector, not just here in Saskatchewan, but around the world. So Murad did his degree in our Edwards School of Business. He's in commerce. He also did an MBA out of the States, and he's the president and CEO of AGT Foods. So Murad's family actually immigrated from Saskatchewan, to Saskatchewan from Turkey. They settled in a place called Davidson, which is not very big. So it's bigger than the town that I'm from, but it would be considered a small town by most of the world. But he recognized relatively early on the global opportunity for processing pulse crops. And so from his first processing company that he started in Regina, AGT Foods has now grown to 45 facilities on 5 continents with over 3,000 employees, and they export to over 120 countries around the world. And so when you think about that and you think about plant-based protein and how essential it is for so many people's diets around the world as one of their primary protein sources, think about the work that Murad is doing. Here in the prairies, we are one of the world leading exporters of pulse crops. Murad is making sure those pulse crops are getting to the people that need them the most. And he's been recognized locally and globally for his entrepreneurship and impact, including the 2016 EY Entrepreneur of the Year for Canada and the 2017 World Entrepreneur of the Year by that same organization. So huge impact, both locally, because he's helped create a market for our local farmers, and globally by making sure that food gets where it's going. But at the same time, the economic development piece of it, he has created through the processing facilities that he's developed. He has created all kinds of jobs around the world, both the people working and the 3,000 people working in the processing plants, but also all the people that are producing the crops that are going in and the people that are retailing those crops. When we think about the whole agri-food system, he's really amped that up. Last one I want to highlight is Dr. Melissa Arcan. And so Melissa is actually a professor here in our college, and she's the only academic I'm going to highlight, but I wanted to talk about her because she's Cree. She's from Muskeg Lake Cree Nation here in Saskatchewan. And she started off, her first degree was actually in environmental science, and then she ended up, like a few of us, finding her way into soil science at the graduate level. She's a professor. She's the academic director of our Kichio Kawimau ASCII, which translates into Great Mother Earth Knowledge Center. She's an instructor in our Kanawea Teiten ASCII program, which translates into Let Us Take Care of the Land, that trains. So her work is really aimed at working with communities to help them identify land management practices that work best on First Nations lands to help enhance soil health and the sustainability of the lands that they steward. And her teaching actually works directly with prospective land managers, people who want to work in land management on reserve. And so I'll talk more about some of those opportunities a little bit later, but she's a great example of how somebody who's done a lot of work in her training was all in Western science, and now in her research program, she's really bringing together community engagement. She's working with communities to understand the challenges that they face and bridging that traditional knowledge and Western knowledge or Western science to try to help identify the best solutions. So, doing workshops on mapping and land stewardship and soil classification and all of these pieces to help the communities build out their toolkit that they can combine with their traditional knowledge to find great paths forward. So lots of that's just a handful. That's just a handful of examples, and I'm going to go through a few more now that are just more generic examples of, because otherwise, if I were to do that level of detail for every possible career, I would actually need a week-long workshop, and we do have less than an hour if I'm allowing time for questions. And so the next kind of way I want to talk about this is talking about doing what you love. And so, what are your interests? Because, like I said, I didn't come into straight into agriculture, but it is my, now it is absolutely my everything. It was how I was brought up. I moved over to geography, realized partway through that geography degree that where I really belonged and loved to be was in agriculture, in soil science. Oftentimes the cool careers in agriculture, you don't even know they exist because they're not necessarily part of our traditional high school or primary school curriculum. But what are your interests, right? So maybe you're interested in biology or nutrition or computer science or education. Some of these things that we think about on the more regular. This group of students here, they're setting up at a major gardening show. Their love is horticulture, right? And so that's what they're wanting to pursue their careers in. So one of the areas where we tend to see a lot of people making the jump over to agriculture is folks that start off with a passion for biology and environmental science. Maybe they love working outside or thinking about ecosystems, maybe love understanding how plants work at the most fundamental level. And so in this area, there's just tons of opportunities. And this is maybe a little bit less of a stretch if you think about it from a science perspective. So things like agronomy, which is the science of how we produce, it's the science of production agriculture that brings together biology and chemistry, understanding, what crops grow best where and in what rotation and how you manage, weeds and pests and things like that. So agronomy is all of those things pulled together. But there's a big emphasis on environmental science within agriculture. Actually, we have an excellent environmental science program here. I know many of my counterpart universities across Canada have that integration of environmental science and agriculture. And I want to emphasize here, a lot of people tend to think these are kind of a dichotomy, but they absolutely are not. Everything we do, agriculture is in the environment. Agriculture is affected by the environment. What we can grow, how we grow it, where we grow it, all of that is influenced by the environment. And yes, when done poorly, agriculture can have a negative effect on the environment, but we really pride ourselves through science-based work on agriculture, identifying agricultural methods that are in harmony with the environment. So looking at ways to minimize any types of undesired impacts. But also the foundational understanding that you gain in, understanding crop science or soil science. These are helpful for all kinds of environmental careers. Water security agency, remediation and reclamation. A lot of our scientists, science grads have gone on to work in remediation and reclamation consulting for companies all over Canada. Plant breeding and genetics, like this is the animal genetics. This is really cutting edge stuff where a lot of the big advances are made. When we look at crop productivity over the last few decades, a lot of our ability to continue to grow more crops on the same amount of land comes down to advances in plant genetics. So this is where we're talking about people understanding and decoding the wheat genome, so we can actually understand what the different parts of that genome do and how we can make sure that the wheat that we're producing is optimally optimized for the environment it's being grown in, that it has maximum resistance to pests and pathogens, so we can reduce the amount of crop protection inputs that we need, which is important for both the economy and for the environment. We want the varieties that are most resistant to climate volatility, because that ensures a crop in most years that is not going to be lost to drought or flooding, and it can ensure greater food security. So biology, environmental science, there's so many paths within here, and I could go on and on with this one, but I need to get to the rest of them too. Animals. Maybe you're not that into animal genetics, which I just touched on. Maybe you just really like being around animals. And a lot of people automatically think veterinarian and veterinary technologist, and make no mistake, those are really important careers in agriculture, constantly in demand. I'm looking at the vet school or the Western College of Veterinary Medicine across the street from me, and they're constantly looking for people that are interested in working with farm animals as veterinarians. So lots of opportunities there. But even if you don't get into vet school, or if you get partway in there and you're like, this is not for me, there are so many ways to work with animals in agriculture, animal production, dairy, beef, poultry, sheep, goats. I mean, folks, if you've ever seen it on a menu, somewhere out there, there's a production system that involves working with those animals. And that includes folks that specialize in animal health, animal nutrition. Not all animal health and welfare jobs are in vet clinics. There's a whole host of government jobs for folks with expertise and interest in animal science as well. Chemistry and microbiology, maybe you've always loved chemistry, but you're like, what am I going to do with a degree in chemistry? Like, it's, breaking down, looking at the properties of matter and how they change. Again, environmental science, there's so much work that needs chemistry expertise to look at measuring and monitoring the sustainability of agro-ecosystems. Food science, chemistry is the foundation of nutrition. It's the foundation of food processing. And it's also essential in developing new methods to reduce food waste. So if we think about, when you think about going to the grocery store now, when I go to the grocery store now in my 50s versus going to the grocery store, even in my 20s, that all the produce here in Saskatchewan looks so much better than it did then, because we've come up with better ways to store and transport various types of food, to get them from the fields to the shelf more reliably, and to help them stay fresh longer. That involved chemistry. And designing new crop fertility and protection products, from controlled release fertilizers to biofertilizers to products designed to control pests under a changing climate. Chemistry and microbiology are just key foundational sciences that have incredible impact in agriculture. It's quite common, actually, for people who are doing degrees in microbiology over in our health sciences to come over here and take training in food science to complement that, because they know that's going to translate into more career opportunities for them. And that brings me to food and nutrition. Man, like, whether you're talking about plant-based proteins, or you're talking about gluten-free flours, nutraceuticals, cultured meat, nutritionally balanced protein bars, soup mixes for food banks, man, the opportunity goes on and on in this space. And that value-added processing is one of the, what's really seen as one of the great next opportunities for growth in Canada's agriculture and agri-food sector. And so there are careers in food science, so folks that are helping to turn commodities into ingredients. So it's, going from, here's a field pea, I'm going to take that field pea, I'm going to extract the protein out of that, I'm going to turn it into your plant-based burger over here. But you know what? That field pea also had some carbohydrates. Well, I'm going to make sure I do something else with the carbohydrates. Maybe I'm going to turn it into decomposable cutlery that you get at your favorite takeaway. And maybe there's some part that doesn't go with any of those things. Well, is there possibility for turning that into animal feed, so we're not wasting any of the energy that came from the sun into that field pea, and we're looking at using all of the parts of that. When you hear about circular economy in agriculture, we're really trying to close the loop on everything that we're doing. And this industry needs everything from scientists that want to help develop the new processing methods and the products to people that are interested in scaling up these methods and products from the lab to the pilot scale to the production line. So folks that are figuring things out at the lab scale and moving them all the way up so that Murad Al-Khatib can incorporate them into his latest production line within AGT Foods. There's room in food nutrition for all of that, but also for folks that are just interested in developing a better bison jerky, and everything that you see within here, from smaller enterprises to those new products that you see on the shelf, up to those big global companies like AGT. Engineering, physics, and math. For those of you, and a number of you are sort of early to mid-career. Maybe you've heard about the long-standing kind of conflicts between engineers and agriculture, but in fact, we are more collaborative than you can imagine in so many ways. So if you've never met an equation you didn't love, or nothing makes you happier than taking things apart and to understand how they work and putting them back together, man, this is my dad. Like this is the place. Agriculture is the place for you. There is absolutely something for you. Every aspect of engineering has applications in agriculture, from designing autonomous sprayers, self-driving sprayers, or sensor-enabled equipment so that you're only applying stuff where it's needed, computer systems capable of handling big data, personal protective equipment to help protect farmers and food processors as they're doing their work. All of that requires engineers. Drones, like we see here. And much of food and bioproduct science requires collaborations with engineers as well to design new processes for extracting value from biomaterials. So that whole bioprocessing space, whether you're processing for food, feed, fiber, fuel, any one of those, there is an engineering component to getting from that crop, that biological product, into the product that folks are purchasing. This is a big one, and this is, I would say, one of the areas that we're really exploding right now. So all of these spaces, and I'm really highlighting the ones where I just know there's always constant demand. Computer science, artificial intelligence, like I said at the outset, agriculture is not just shovels and pitchforks. And yeah, most farmers do have a shovel and probably a pitchfork, but that's not the primary tool anymore. Increasingly, the whole sector is dependent on big data, and this includes bioinformatics that is being used to inform the latest breeding advances. And so that is bioinformatics is people doing the data analytics on that genomic level data, trying to understand all the building blocks of life and using that to inform breeding decisions and health decisions. So plants, animals, microbes, proximal sensors that monitor animal health and welfare, all of those things collect data. Remote sensing, we're using a lot of remote sensing as well to monitor crops in crop performance in real time. So all of that, there's computer science that goes into designing all of these, collecting all of the information that's coming out of these different sensors and advanced biotechnology processes. But then we also are increasingly using then computer programming, artificial intelligence, big data analytics to make sense of that. Because otherwise it's just a whole bunch of numbers, a whole bunch of data on a computer, right? And so we are using more and more artificial intelligence to help make sense of the sheer volume of data. And this demand for this skill set can be found literally at every step of the value chain, from the soil microorganisms right through to plant production, the animals that are eating those plants, including the humans, through to the food products that are being developed, and through to those global supply chains, food safety, food quality, food security. All of those steps, there's information being collected, and these folks that have that expertise and that passion for computer science and artificial intelligence have an important role to play within agriculture to help that make sense. And speaking of making things make sense, education and communications are one of the big areas where we're seeing more and more growth in terms of opportunity. And this includes, so too many people don't understand where their food comes from. They're separated from that, just generationally. And in the worst case scenarios, they've actually started believing some of the misinformation that is so abundant online. And so what we really need are communicators that love to communicate at every level, that can help get the message, the understanding of agriculture and its importance, so that people really like this understand the potential and opportunity and importance of careers in agriculture. And we need folks that are willing to talk to primary schools. So whether that's, maybe that's teachers, that actually understand agriculture themselves, taking their kids on field trips, 4-H, ag in the classroom programs, the secondary school, maybe it's, making sure that there's people that are good at education and communications that are again, offering field trips or career days. Post-secondary, I'll talk more about later in the presentation, but also people that love talking about agriculture that can compete with the prettiness of some of that misinformation. So they're really able to talk effectively about how Canada produces some of the highest quality, safest, and most sustainably produced food anywhere in the world, to really help people take pride in that. And so how can we communicate, through social media or general public campaigns to get that message out at every level? Business, economics, and policy, man. So I've talked about some great business examples. And so whether you start in business school, and I can give you more examples of those folks, and start in business school and end up in agri-food, or you start in agribusiness or ag economics in your studies and stay, there's lots of options to consider. Entrepreneurship at anywhere along the value chain, folks that are developing soil health tools, through to folks that are, like I say, doing, having those global businesses like Murad, developing a spin-off business from any of the things I just talked about, starting a business related to agronomy, or a business related to, starting your own bison jerky company, developing a side business from the farm. So maybe you're doing a lot of primary production, but you want to also do your own farm to table market. You need those business skills to do that effectively. Lots of our graduates in agricultural economics or agribusiness end up doing amazing careers in government at every level, from First Nations, local, provincial, national, and also international, with folks like the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. Risk and insurance management, not-for-profits. These are all the places that I tend to see our grads ending up, because anytime, like I say, agriculture is everywhere, it's integrated with the environment. Any organization that needs to understand how all of those things come together and how decisions are made and informed will be looking for folks with expertise in this space. And last, but not least, I want to mention that farming itself is a very important career opportunity. And so I know I've talked about, the focus was meant to be the surprising things, and probably talking about farming as a career is not that surprising. But I do want to emphasize that it is more than shovels and pitchforks. Increasingly, owning and operating a farming operation means you have at least some understanding of all of the things I just talked about: science, business, engineering, data analysis, communication. And it's a demanding path. It's not without its risks, but there's also just tremendous reward when you think about the contributions that our farmers, our primary producers, are making with respect to all of those global challenges that I highlighted at the outset. The role of farming in tackling food security challenges, water security, energy security. And not everyone who works in primary production are themselves an owner-operator. There are lots of jobs in farming. So, working with some of these larger operations as staff to bring, like I say, all of those strengths are part of what's needed. Well, maybe I, as an owner-operator, don't have all of those strengths. Maybe I need to hire somebody who can really help me with the data analytics side, because I'm collecting all of this information through my sensor-enabled equipment. And I need to, somebody who can work with that data, and I need an agronomist working with me who can help with, help decision making. But at the same time, I also want somebody who can hop on the combine and help out at certain times of the year as well. So lots of opportunities in this space. And again, I could do a whole other talk on this and would be happy to at some point. So one of the other pieces I do want to highlight is just the potential for agriculture to be part of reconciliation, so living with the land. And so this is another photo of Melissa Arcan, and a quote from an interview she did where she talks about how Indigenous people had thriving food systems before colonization, and many communities are bringing those food systems back. We are connected to agriculture through treaty. And so Kanaway-Taytan Aski, you may recall, I said that's what we are referring to when we talk about that translates from Cree to let us take care of the land. And there's a lot of opportunities right now to work with First Nations across the country, to work with Métis communities as they move to new land management regimes, as they are looking to build more in-house expertise in land management. And so I'm seeing more and more of our graduates ending up working in the lands offices associated as part of the lands team associated with First Nations, because there are opportunities for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous land managers, land governance experts, business partners, and so on to support communities throughout this. So a lot of opportunity in this space as well. So I want to just mention that I've highlighted a bunch of opportunities by discipline, but hopefully if you're listening to what I was saying, in addition to looking at the slides, you'll have heard me talk about all the ways that these different careers intersect. And so I'd love to just do one more interactive quiz to see if folks were paying attention. So talk about collaboration. So I'm just going to read this and then I'll get Haley to pop the poll up. So sorry, I should have put this scenario on the slide, but so everyone listening? Okay. A large cattle ranch in Alberta wants to reduce their methane emissions and improve soil carbon storage by switching to a smart rotational grazing system. So they want to reduce their emissions and improve their carbon storage by switching to a rotational grazing system. They're going to use solar-powered GPS collars for their cows. They're going to use satellites to monitor the grass growth, and they want to use automated gates to control cattle movement. They also want to verify their environmental impact to access carbon credits, another career I didn't talk about, just this whole measurement, reporting, and verification space. So large cattle ranch wants to reduce methane emissions, improve soil carbon storage, with a rotational grazing system. They want to use solar-powered GPS, satellite monitoring of grass growth, and automated gates. And they want to verify their environmental impact. So Haley, can you pop up that poll? Who would be involved in implementing this sustainable grazing system? So would we have the rancher who manages livestock and integrates the new practices, a remote sensing specialist using satellite data, software developer who creates the app interface, a livestock nutritionist who advises on animal diets? I think you all see where this is going, right? Absolutely. The answer is all of the above. So anytime we are thinking about agriculture, we need to be thinking about the whole system. And that's part of both the challenge and the opportunity associated with agriculture. So with that, maybe Haley, I'll get you to go to the next slide. And so you might be wondering, how do I get there from here? Well, hopefully it is not pushing a bed down the highway in March. That's me running down the highway with one of my students, part of a fundraising thing. But how do I get there from here? I mean, maybe it involves, actually it could involve, you could start by pushing a bed down the highway as an ag student in our college, but start where you are. So we've talked today about what do you value? What are those what kinds of things are important to you? There's lots of paths to get to the same place, but what's important to you? What impact do you want to have? What do you love? What do you love to do? How do you love to spend your time? And what difference do you want to make in the world? And I want to, when I say that there's many paths to get where you're going, this week we interviewed somebody whose passion is communications and events planning. We need somebody who's doing that in agriculture. This person's background they happen to have grown up in rural Saskatchewan, but they're really, they did had a whole career in fashion design, and now they want to take their passion for event planning and bring it to agriculture. So literally any path you can imagine is possible. So there's lots of education opportunities, and so I noticed that most of you that are here today are over 18. Maybe a number of you have already finished your first your first bit of post-secondary, and there's all kinds of education opportunities in agriculture. So there are degrees in undergraduate and graduate in any of the disciplines that I highlighted. Certainly there's an abundance of agriculture colleges and schools across the country that offer a whole range of programming depending on where you are. And so this includes micro-credentials, certificates, diplomas, degrees. And if your background is maybe not in agriculture and you need a little bit more fundamental knowledge of that, a lot of us, we have an entirely online certificate that's an introduction to agriculture that you could, you layer that on with your biology degree, and you're going to be much better equipped to move into the next stage of your ag journey. And there's also many of the polytechnics have great offerings related to the agriculture and agri-food sector. So wherever you are, there's a path forward for you. If you're looking for more info on careers in ag, there's a whole bunch of great websites here, and I know these slides will be shared later, the talk will be shared later, and you can come back and take a look at these. If you want to explore your interests and your ag curious, the Think Ag site is put together by Ag in the Classroom, and it has some quizzes that'll help you walk through some of the things I talked about here today, as well as these are great sites that have a whole bunch of jobs that where an agriculture interests, interesting jobs might be posted. So with that, I just want to emphasize that the world really needs sustainable food systems. Everyone needs to eat, and agriculture is part of the solution to so many of the greatest challenges that our world is facing right now. So, I really hope that many of you that are here today, if you're not already in the ag sector, that you're now fired up and excited to join us, because I got to tell you, the future is food. Thank you. Oh, I love all the applause over there on the side. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Angela. That was so great. We have a lot of messages in the chat too, with a lot of appreciation and saying that this was very informative. So thanks so much for that. We're going to open it up to some questions now. So for the first one, I have, coming from a background in chemical and environmental engineering, what career opportunities are available for me in the agricultural sector if I'm looking to transition? And would I be required to get a new degree or any training? How can I go best about this?
So chemical and biological engineering, certainly the first thing that comes to mind is a lot of the work related to inputs, and as well as to on the food and bioprocessing side of things, when I think about my colleagues that are doing work in that space. So chemical and biological engineers, when I was talking about the careers where folks are basically designing processes for extraction of proteins, or conversion of fiber into of plant fibers into some sort of an energy source, or some other sort of press board, things like that. All of those are really exciting spaces. So that whole value-added bioprocessing space is one. But also there'd be interesting opportunities, I think, in terms of designing the process for developing new types of crop protection inputs. So different emerging opportunities in developing new kinds of fertilizers or pesticides, things like that as well. So yeah, cool space for sure with interactions with agriculture. And so I don't think you would you would need a new degree. You just need to find that industry, figure out which industry you're excited to work with, and find your way in there.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of other people in the chat, there's a lot of similar questions asking how do they get started? How do they get into the agriculture industry, whether they have a different background or actual agricultural science degrees? Where do they start?
Yeah, so I think sometimes one of the first things that and I noticed we had quite a few folks that are not from Canada, and sometimes that folks feel like, oh, that can be a bit of a barrier, and so a willingness to to take a job that is maybe a little bit parallel to what you're doing, just to demonstrate that willingness to learn would be one piece. So if you've got like I say, if you've got a degree in biology, for example, just sort of standard biology, but no experience in agriculture, then you might want to do a little bit of additional training just so you can help you deepen your understanding of how your discipline relates to agriculture. So like I was talking about our online Intro to Ag certificate, that would help you kind of understand, as you were taking these classes, because they're all introductory level classes, you'd be going, oh, now I understand how my knowledge of photosynthesis and ecology translates into agricultural systems. And then looking for internships, those types of opportunities are really important. Depending on the school, some of those are built right into them. And oftentimes there's good opportunities. There'll be peak opportunities for you to build that experience during the summer. So working with a farm, or in early fall when folks are doing a lot of that processing work, that's when you're going to see more of those opportunities. And so being willing to take a seasonal job to build your experience might be an important step in that transition.
Thanks so much, Angela. That's all the time we have for questions, but I do just want to take the opportunity while I still have people here to go over some more opportunities and initiatives that Eco Canada has. So Eco Canada's Pay for Performance program covers up to 70% of training costs for small and mid-sized Canadian businesses looking to upskill their workforce in areas like project management and communication. Eligible training must be through ECO-approved courses, and this offer is available until August 31st, 2025. You can scan the QR code to learn more. We also have the Oceans Alliance Canada, which is a new initiative Eco Canada recently launched. They'll be hosting a conference and consortium on September 3rd and 4th. Join national ocean leaders in Halifax for 2 days of hands-on learning, in-depth discussions, and cross-sector connection focused on building the future of Canada's ocean workforce. You can scan the QR code to learn more about this too. And then, of course, we have Eco Impact. It's back for another year. You can join us on February 19th and 20th for Eco Impact 2026, Future-Proofing the Environmental Workforce, Technology, and Talent. We'll have more exciting speakers and sessions and awards, so be sure to join us for this. You can scan the QR code here to learn more as well. And for all of our other upcoming events and webinars, you can scan the QR code and check out our events calendar to learn more. But thank you guys again for coming. Thank you, Angela, so much for all your insightful information and an engaging presentation. Thank you for coming, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day.